Here is a fact that will break your brain. Greater Los Angeles is denser than Greater New York. Not the city. New York City itself is 3 times denser than Los Angeles proper. But zoom out to the full urbanized area, and Los Angeles wins. More people packed per square mile than the New York Metro. That sounds impossible, and that is exactly the point. Because that density is the reason Los Angeles does not work. The city is too dense for comfortable driving, and too spread out for effective transit. It is trapped in a paradox that no other American city has ever created. And the strangest part? The thing that built this mess was not cars. It was a technology that disappeared before most Angelenos were born. If you want to understand how geography shapes where Americans live, subscribe. The skeleton nobody remembers. The technology was streetcars, and the story they tell overturns almost everything people assume about Los Angeles. By 1890, Los Angeles was only the 57th largest city in the United States by population. A small sun-baked town that most Americans could not find on a map. But it was already 14th in the entire country in street rail mileage. That gap between population rank and rail rank is the key to everything that followed. A massive web of rail lines pushed outward into empty land, creating long, thin fingers of suburbs stretching across the basin in every direction, decades before a single person in Los Angeles owned a car. In 1900, the city had just 3.7 people per acre. New York had 51. Think about what that means. Los Angeles was already enormous in physical footprint, already sprawling across the landscape, but nearly empty inside its own borders. Miles of bungalow-lined streets, pepper trees, and vacant lots separated by long stretches of dust and scrub. You could ride a streetcar for an hour and pass through neighborhoods that had more coyotes than residents. It was the skeleton of a city, stretched wide and waiting to be filled. And this was not an accident. It was a deliberate choice. Anglo-Protestant elites from the Midwest were building the anti-New York. No tenements, no crowding, no smokestacks. They marketed Los Angeles as a health resort, a moral refuge, a city of homes where families could own land, breathe clean air, and escape the industrial chaos of eastern cities. They were not building a metropolis. They were building a suburb and calling it a city. The streetcar lines made it possible, with cheap, fast connections that let people live miles from anything and still reach a job. That suburban skeleton, that pattern of low-density homes scattered across a wide basin, was baked into Los Angeles' DNA long before the first freeway was even imagined. But a city of low-density homes in a desert has one fatal weakness, and what Los Angeles did to solve it is one of the most ruthless power grabs in American urban history. The heist that built a city water. That was the weakness. Los Angeles sits in a coastal desert. The Los Angeles River, if you can call it a river, was seasonal and unreliable. For a small town, it was enough. For a growing suburb stretching farther every year, it was a death sentence waiting to happen. Mulholland, the city's water superintendent, understood this better than anyone. He and his allies engineered a manufactured drought scare, exaggerating the city's water crisis to win public support for one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects of the early 20th century. A 233-mile aqueduct stretched from the Owens Valley, high in the eastern Sierra Nevada, all the way to Los Angeles. The project was staggering in scale. Tunnels blasted through mountain rock, siphons crossing desert valleys, a gravity-fed system that dropped water thousands of feet across some of the most remote terrain in California. When it opened in 1913, Mulholland stood before the crowd as the water poured through and delivered 5 words that would define the city's future. He said, "There it is. Take it." The Owens Valley paid the price. Its lakes shrank. Its farms dried up. Its communities withered as Los Angeles drank the water that had sustained them for generations. But Los Angeles did not look back. But here's the part most people miss entirely. The aqueduct did not just bring water to Los Angeles. It brought water to the San Fernando Valley, a vast stretch of agricultural land north of the city, where Mulholland's political backers and business allies had already been quietly buying up property. They knew what was coming. Federal rules required that aqueduct water could only be used inside Los Angeles city limits. So if the San Fernando Valley wanted water, it had to become part of Los Angeles. And in 1915, the entire valley voted to annex itself into the city. Not because residents wanted to be Angelenos, because they had no other choice. Control the water, control the land. That single annexation vote transformed Los Angeles from a small coastal town into a geographically massive city practically overnight. The footprint exploded. The suburban skeleton got bigger, and the pattern that the streetcars had started, spreading outward, always outward, accelerated beyond anything the original boosters had imagined. By the mid-20th century, Los Angeles had everything it needed to become a proper world-class metropolis. Water flowing through the aqueduct, cheap, flat land in every direction, a booming economy powered by defense contracts, aerospace manufacturing, and the film industry. Freeways were filling in the gaps between old streetcar suburbs, stitching the sprawl together. And around 1960, city planners drew up infrastructure for 10 million residents. Los Angeles was on track to become one of the great dense cities on Earth. But then something happened that reversed all of it, and it was not a natural disaster or an economic collapse. It was the people who already lived there. The revolution nobody voted for. Starting in the late 1960s, well-organized homeowner groups launched what historians call the slow growth movement. Through community planning processes, public hearings, and relentless political pressure, they systematically downzoned neighborhood after neighborhood across Los Angeles. Block by block, district by district, they slashed the legal housing capacity of the city, cutting it by as much as 60% in some areas. Think about what that means in practical terms. Infrastructure that had been designed and built for 10 million people would now legally serve roughly 4 million. Pipes, roads, sewers, transit lines, all sized for a city that the zoning code had decided would never exist. The city did not just stop growing denser, it legally prevented itself from ever doing so. Homeowners used zoning as a weapon to protect property values, protect parking, and protect what they called neighborhood character. The zoning code still requires single-family houses on 5,000 square foot lots with 2 covered parking spaces across vast portions of the city. Some parcels still legally allow private horse stables inside the second largest city in America. Horse stables, in a metropolis of 13 million people. That is the legacy of the slow growth movement, written into law and enforced to this day. But here's the cruel irony that makes the whole story tragic. Downzoning did not stop people from coming to Los Angeles. Millions kept arriving, for jobs, for weather, for the entertainment industry, for the simple promise of California. They just had nowhere to go. Demand surged against a frozen housing supply. Rents climbed year after year. Overcrowding spread through neighborhoods that were never built for that many residents. Homelessness exploded into a crisis visible on every freeway overpass and public park in the city. And all of that density, people crammed into apartments designed for half as many occupants, cars spilling onto streets engineered for fewer trips, is exactly what created the paradox from the opening of this video. Los Angeles became denser than New York at the metro scale, not because it was planned to be dense, but because it was legally prevented from building enough housing for the people who showed up anyway. The density was not designed, it was forced, compressed into whatever cracks the zoning code left open, and the consequences of that paradox show up every single day, in a way you can literally see from space. 72 suburbs in search of a city, Los Angeles ended up as something no urban theory had predicted. A polycentric metro with no real center. Someone once described it as 72 suburbs in search of a city, and the phrase stuck because it is almost literally true. LA technically has a downtown. There are high-rises, a financial district, a handful of museums and concert halls, but most Angelenos rarely go there. It does not function as the heart of the city the way Manhattan does for New York, or the Loop does for Chicago. Instead, people live, work, eat, and shop in scattered nodes spread across the Basin, Santa Monica, Pasadena, Glendale, Century City, Koreatown, the West Side. Each one feels more like an edge than a core. When you drive the freeways, you are never really in town. You are always on the way to somewhere else, passing through the space between centers that never quite connect. This layout creates consequences that millions of people feel every day. Drivers lose around 72 hours a year sitting in traffic, not because Los Angeles has the worst roads, but because every trip connects two different nodes through a system that was never designed for that pattern. You sit on the 405 at 5 p.m. watching brake lights stretch to the horizon, inching past exits for places that are all simultaneously the center, and none of them actually are. The region has the worst year-round particulate pollution in the country, a brown haze that settles into the basin and refuses to leave because the San Gabriel Mountains trap it on three sides. On bad days, you cannot see the mountains from downtown. They vanish behind a wall of smog that has been a fact of life here for generations. And the growing metro rail system faces a challenge that no other American transit network has to deal with. Instead of funneling riders toward one dense hub, it has to connect dozens of separate centers that are all equally important and equally far apart. Building a subway that serves one downtown is hard enough. Building a network that serves 40 of them is a problem that may not have a solution. It is the worst of both worlds, too dense for suburban comfort, too dispersed for urban efficiency. A city caught between two identities, belonging fully to neither. But LA almost got a completely different future. In 1974, city planning director Calvin Hamilton proposed what he called the centers concept, 38 high-density nodes linked by transit corridors surrounded by preserved low-rise neighborhoods. Imagine mini Manhattans connected by rail, each one a walkable, dense village surrounded by quiet residential streets. If it had been fully built, Los Angeles today might look like a string of urban pearls spread across the basin, each one vibrant and self-contained, connected by trains instead of freeways. It was a genuine alternative future, one that acknowledged the sprawl and tried to work with it rather than against it. Political backlash from homeowner groups killed most of it. The same forces that had downzoned the city in the first place saw Hamilton's plan as a threat to the low-density life they had fought to protect. And that raises the real question hanging over Los Angeles today. A city at war with its own past. The battle over LA's future is really a battle over its past. The city is now trying to upzone land near transit stations, expand the metro rail network, and legalize more housing types in neighborhoods that have been frozen in single-family zoning for half a century. Every change is a fight. Every proposal runs into the same forces that downzoned the city in the first place. Homeowners who see density as a threat to the life they were promised when they bought their house push back. They are not wrong to feel that way. They were sold a vision of Los Angeles that depended on keeping other people out, and now the math no longer works. Meanwhile, climate change is tightening the water constraints that made Los Angeles possible in the first place. The Colorado River, which supplies a significant share of Southern California's water, is over-allocated. More water is legally promised to cities, farms, and states than actually flows in the river. Snowpack in the Sierra Nevada is shrinking. The same water dependency that built the city could be the thing that limits it. Every drop that flows into Los Angeles is a drop that does not flow somewhere else, and the competition for that water is getting fiercer every decade. Los Angeles sits at a crossroads between two identities: the low-rise suburban dream that its founders sold in the 1890s, and the dense transit-connected metropolis that 13 million people actually need it to become. No one knows which version wins. The answer depends on whether the city can overcome its own history, a history of choices that each made sense at the time, but compounded into something no one planned and no one can easily undo. The city that shouldn't exist. Pull back to the satellite view. Look at Los Angeles from space at night and you will see something that looks nothing like any other American city. New York glows white-hot at its core and fades at the edges. Chicago is a bright point on a dark lakeshore. Los Angeles is neither. It is a continuous sheet of amber light stretching 50 miles in every direction. No bright center, no dark suburbs, just an even glow bleeding into the mountains on three sides and the ocean on the fourth. That glow is the physical fingerprint of every decision in this story. The streetcar lines that stretched the city wide, the water heist that made it massive, the suburban dream that kept it low, the downzoning that froze it in place, the paradox that squeezed millions of people into a shape that was never designed to hold them. Los Angeles did not become America's strangest city by accident. It became it through a century of choices, each one logical at the time, each one compounding into something that no single architect, planner, or politician ever intended. Most American cities grew around a harbor, a river, or a crossroads. Los Angeles grew around an idea that you could build a suburb the size of a nation and call it a city. And 13 million people are still living with the consequences.